So hopefully this will make sense. Remember that nodal regions are different from formal culture regions in that they are defined by their organization, and they have three components. You'll read about two of those components, the node and the hinterland, but I always like to remind everybody that there's also a network that connects the node and the hinterland. So let's move on to the third type of region, and that is the vernacular region. This is just these are some slides that are sort of hypothetical functional regions. You know, we have 50 states, right? Now, if you were to rearrange the boundaries of states so that states were hinterlands of the major urban areas, this is something something that you might get. So these are just kind of for fun. You know, you might take, for example, okay, this would be the hinterland of Tulsa. This would be the hinterland of Oklahoma City, and this is based on counties. So you can see the 3,500 or whatever counties we have in the U.S. And each one of those counties are, recognized as hinterlands toward the metropolitan area. So you would see like Fort Worth versus Dallas, St. Louis versus Kansas City, or something like that. If you increase the size of those metropolitan or those states from 2 million to 5 million, then of course the region gets a little bit larger. Look at what happened to the Denver hinterland. Okay, and in a sense, this is all hypothetical, but I'll show you some other sort of examples that this is kind of realistic in a way too, because rural people will tend to go to what we call higher order service centers for various reasons. Now, if you're gonna buy milk and bread and groceries today, then you're not going to probably drive out of Stillwater to do that. You might drive across town depending on whatever grocery store you like. But say you need a new pair of shoes, or I need a new dress belt or something like that. I definitely need a new pair of pants. Okay, my wife's always telling me you need a new pair of pants. I like my old pants. Okay, so to go to shop for the pair of pants that I really should get, I probably need to go to Oklahoma City or Tulsa, right? So or maybe get online and all that. But if we can forget about Amazon for a minute, I want to go somewhere and try on shoes or whatever it may be. I'm going to have to go to a large urban center. All right, so that makes sense, right? Oklahoma City or Tulsa are fine. What's a higher order service than shopping for clothes, or maybe even shopping for an automobile, car? What's a higher order service than that? Something that would require you to go to Dallas or Houston. So how about rather than shopping, say for example you're diagnosed with a fairly rare type of cancer. Heaven forbid, hope you don't get diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. But if you have some kind of illness that requires a very specialized medical care facility or specialist, then chances are you're going to have to go to a larger urban center than that. You might have to go to Houston, to MD Anderson, or maybe to the Mayo Clinic or something like that in Minneapolis, near Minneapolis. So, that's a higher order center still. And so, in the United States, we have different locations that provide different sets of services. And for the most part, this is kind of an urban geography discussion. But for the most part, the larger the urban center, the greater the specialization, the greater variety of services available, right? So if you're flying to Tokyo this afternoon, well, you might be able to leave out on a flight from Stillwater, but eventually that flight's going to go to a large airport somewhere in the United States that's going to have international connections to Tokyo. And there aren't that many of them, right? So you're probably either going to fly from Oklahoma City or from Stillwater to Dallas-Fort Worth, and you can get there from Dallas-Fort Worth, right? Or you would have to go to Chicago, or you would have to go to JFK, or you would have to go to LAX or something like that, or San Francisco. So this is another higher order center. And there are others, but just to give you some examples, if we increase the size of the states to 8 million people, this is what we wind up with. Dallas, of course, becomes the capital city, and St. Louis apparently becomes the we're sort of in the division line between St. Louis and Dallas, and then here's Houston, of course. So we can just keep on doing this. Now, there are other ways of sort of regionalizing things. Okay, now you might look at this map, and I happen to be a Rangers fan. How many of you are Rangers fans? Okay, well, how about Cardinals fans? Probably a few Cardinals fans around here, but maybe Major League Baseball is just not your thing. Huh? Maybe it's basketball, maybe it's football. But this is what's referred to, and this is not a really serious map, but it's what's kind of referred to as a fan shed map. The shed meaning the term shed, rather than, it doesn't mean something like a building, but a shed is a term that refers generally to a watershed. A watershed is a physical geography term, and that's just the area the area that is drained by a particular watercourse, a stream, river. So we live here in Stillwater. We're in the Cimarron River watershed, or the Arkansas River watershed, or the Mississippi River watershed, however you want to look at it, whatever scale. And so there are other terms that we use. For example, you go to the grocery store, you buy a gallon of milk. You go to Brahms and buy a gallon of milk. That milk will have come from what's referred to as the local milk shed, the area that receives fresh milk from local farms. And there is a sort of a definite distance. So there's a maximum distance that you can move fresh milk economically, right? You don't ship fresh milk across the country unless it's like in parts of the developing world where they actually seal it up in those paper boxes. You can buy milk like that. But in the United States, it's all fresh. We buy, for the most part, we refrigerate the milk. Milk has some characteristics. It has a short shelf life, right? It doesn't last very long. It is bulky. It's heavy. It's easily destroyed, easily spilled, easily damaged. For those reasons, because it's bulky compared to its value, that means that if you're going to move a gallon of milk, well, if you move 1,000 gallons of milk, there are some costs involved and fuel costs. Right? So a gallon of fresh milk can only move so far and still be able to produce a profit for those people who are in the milk business. Okay? So the idea here is that that distance creates costs, and something like fresh milk is going to be limited, so that if you're drinking fresh milk, chances are it was produced within about 100 miles. Okay? Unless it's Brahms, that's a different story. So sheds, a fan shed, a milk shed, these are different ways of regionalizing activity, what we call spatial interaction. And all of these are, in a sense, functional regions because they wield influence over certain areas. Now, we could also perhaps look at the NCAA football team fan sheds. Okay, and actually, I've seen maps of that. Most of Oklahoma, as you might guess, tends to lean toward that other team down toward the south. Okay, and but if you're in Payne County, you're pretty much in orange country. You're pretty much safe in orange country. There's another way of looking at it. Things like radio. There are still people who listen to radio, but radio is, in broadcast radio, is something that is very spatial and historically, has these ranges, and these ranges are nice because they're perfect circles in most cases. But if you look at, the big rivalry between the Yankees and the Red Sox, between New York and Boston, and you can actually map where, the radio stations that cater to those two teams have their boundaries. So, here's Boston. Look at this. Providence, Rhode Island is a bastion of Yankees broadcasting right in the in New England. So anyway, this is just an example of how culture kind of plays out in terms of things like baseball rivalries. All right, now we looked at this map once before, and what I'd like for you to do is, this is the Dallas-Fort Worth region, right? The extent, you can see McKinney up here, you can see Louisville, you can see Keller over here, and Mesquite maybe down here. And so this is this fairly broad area, a couple of counties, right? Several counties in North Texas. And can anybody answer the question, what is this place called? Metropolitan area. That's kind of the general term for this. In fact, when we get to urban geography, when we have two big cities together, kind of twin cities like this, there's terms called, conurbation, megalopolis in some cases when you have more than two. But is there a kind of a name that's associated specifically with Dallas and Fort Worth? DFW, yes, DFW, which is kind of the name of the airport, right? So this is one of the terms. But do they refer to it anymore as something else? As the Metroplex? You ever heard of the Metroplex? Maybe the Metroplex is faded away. But when, back in the 70s, in the 80s, they referred to this as the Metroplex. And that is, there are a lot of different sort of versions of this sort of thing. But this term, this kind of general term, the Metroplex, which refers to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area, in a general but yet specific way, is what we call a type of region. It's a figment of people's imaginations or minds that we refer to as a perceptual region. Okay, perceptual region, and there's not any hard and fast rules here. But a perceptual region, sometimes called a vernacular region. A vernacular region is just a region that exists out there. It is often advertised. It's often a marketing effort by some. And it is often intentionally put into popular use. Sometimes it can be rather pejorative. It can be, not necessarily a nice term, or it might be something that a lot of people are very proud of. In fact, it can be both at the same time, depending on who's doing the perceiving, right? People perceive things in different ways for different reasons. So the idea here is that the term perceptual or vernacular region often conjures up positive or negative responses. And for example, the Bible Belt, the term Bible Belt may be maybe something that some people are proud of. Maybe some people use it in a pejorative way. I remember when I was a young college student here at Oklahoma State back in the 80s. I encountered professors who would use that term Bible Belt in an almost insulting way. They would just throw that out. We're in the Bible Belt, right? And that was just in the tone of the word. It was clearly intended to be pejorative. Silicon Valley probably has more of a positive spin on it. In fact, there are a lot of other places in the United States and the world that have borrowed that term silicon to refer to high-tech development. You probably heard of a few places like Round Rock, around Austin, Texas. You ever heard of Silicon Gulch, or this sort of the Texas version of Silicon Valley? There are a lot of other places that take on that term silicon to imply that this is a high-tech area. Ghetto, the term ghetto has forever referred to, it has often been used in a pejorative sense for decades, if not centuries. The term originally comes from the Yiddish term for the areas in which Jewish people were cordoned off in European cities. And so that the term ghetto just referred to segregated areas for the most part. In some ways, not too long ago, young people began to use that term in other ways, though it wasn't necessarily in a pejorative fashion. So perception is everything. Perceptual regions often conjure up feelings, okay? So here's Silicon Valley as an example. The vernacular region of Silicon Valley is around San Jose, the southern part of the San Francisco Bay Area. Here's one of those maps, those meme maps that you see. Meme and maybe not so polite either. So this would be a maybe this is I don't know whose idea would this be of the world? Not a real worldly person, maybe someone who has a lot of stereotypes about the world. So it's pretty awful, isn't it? Lord of the Rings, right? So this is the extent of their knowledge of this. Anyway, so this I think this is a map of somebody from San Francisco. Right? I think that's because California takes up half of North America, something like that. So, anyway, this is an odd old map. Don't take this seriously. Don't print this off. Okay. Perceptions. Perceptions of place. We are trained from an early age to look at maps with north pointing up, to look at globes with north pointing up, and that's all arbitrary. That's not any rule. It's kind of like English grammar. Grammar is something that the New Englanders laid down for us and explained that this is the proper way to do this, and we need to follow these rules. But looking at the Earth from space, it doesn't matter what pole is up or down. But when you do look at a world map like this, it might make you think a little bit differently, right? Now we're going to talk at Astra about map projections later. One thing that you might, when you look at a map like this, normally it's pretty easy to find the United States. And most of us, if you're like me, your eye naturally just goes to the United States on a world map for some reason, right? And on this map, the United States is not in the middle of the map. That's odd. Maybe a Chinese map maker made this. I don't know. But your eye kind of naturally, or maybe a Japanese or Korean map maker, but your eye kind of goes naturally toward the center like this. Now, this place is the United States over on the left, and of course, South America kind of got cut off entirely. But this is a map probably by an Australian cartographer, my guess is. The idea here is that perceptions of place and distance and space can be shaped by things like maps. Okay, here's another one of those vernacular region examples, and this is the term, the use of the term Dixie, and the map that you see here was done by folklorist by the name of John Shelton Reed back in the 60s or the 70s. And all that Reed did was he, in the old days, he used to have these things called phone books. Okay, he used to have telephone books, and I noticed I got the telephone book, this year's telephone book the other day, and it gets thinner and thinner every year, and the type is so small I can't read it anyway. But telephone books are kind of obsolete now, but they used to have these big metropolitan telephone books, and whenever you travel to different, to a big city, you just pull the drawer in the hotel room, and you got this gargantuan gargantuan metropolitan telephone book, the Metroplex or something like that, right? And what this guy did was he just took a bunch of telephone books from all these metropolitan areas, Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, St. Louis, all around New Orleans, and he got these metropolitan white pages, okay? Because the white pages have listings of the names of people and the names of businesses. Yellow pages sort everything by business, and that's not what he was looking for. What Reed was looking for was the use of the term Dixie in the names of businesses, with the assumption that a business, which, somebody who owned a business who wanted to put Dixie in the name of the business must probably have an affinity for the term Dixie and may assume that they were in Dixie. Now, if we were if you're starting a business here in Stillwater or Payne County, maybe you would name your business to have some sort of geographic moniker like Cimarron or Red Dirt or something like that. Okay, I don't know, High Plains, or not High Plains, but Cross Timbers or something like that. Something that's local. Cowboy, perhaps, right? We'd have cowboy in the business, and you can look up 200 cowboy this and that businesses in Stillwater. Well, anyway, this is what he did. He listed all these businesses in all these different cities, and then he drew this map, and this map is based on the percentage of the use of Dixie in comparison to the percentage of the use of American in businesses in the same city. So in other words, where you have the cities that are located within that blue zone, okay, this area here, he refers to, well, this must be the heart of Dixie, because in these places, American is always more, well, in most places, American is more common than Dixie, but in this area, you have Dixie is 1/4 or more as common as American, okay? So, and this is an old thing, and I'm sure many of those Dixie businesses are bankrupt now. But anyway, this is a map of this area of perception, okay? And I think it's kind of funny interesting that southeast, remember we were talking about, is Oklahoma in the middle west or the south? And I said something like southeast. Well, this is like, I was probably cheating. I probably remember this. But southeastern Oklahoma tends to be more, southern oriented than, say, this part of Oklahoma where we are, which is a lot more Midwest. Anyway, just an example. And of course, there's the license plate. They did away with the Heart of Dixie slogan on the Alabama license plate. I ran across this map, which was an update of that other map, but it's what we call a choropleth map of, I think it's cities where those names also are found. And so it's interesting that here in Oklahoma, this part of Oklahoma is often referred to as Little Dixie. And that's probably why you have a clustering of businesses with the term Dixie here. And I don't have a key on this map, and that's awful because you never are supposed to show a map without a key. But you don't see Dixie used a lot in New England. You don't see Dixie used a lot in the upper Midwest. But here it is. And that's enough of that. How about other types of vernacular regions? Okay. Perhaps you've been to College Station. And College Station is it's a college town of a land grant university in Texas, And the campus at College Station, Texas A&M University campus, is it's a different campus in a sense that there are a lot of traditions and that sort of thing. But obviously, Aggie land is it's part of the place, part of the character and sense of the place. Just like Oklahoma State is part of the character and the sense of Stillwater, right? So this is a really old one, but I like this. I like these old Pistol Petes that you don't see this kind of Pistol Pete around anymore. Anyway, this was an old sign. They used to have it on I-35, not too far away from Highway 51. Okay, vernacular regions. Can you think of any other vernacular regions around the area? There's one that's actually really, really well known. It got started in 1961 by television station, radio and television station in Tulsa, and the idea was that they got together, these business folks got together and they said, Tulsa is different from the rest of Oklahoma, and we want to try to get people to visit the lakes and visit Tulsa and see the Art Deco architecture and see the museums and spend their money and eat at restaurants and stay in the hotels and that sort of thing. This was in the early 60s. And, they said, well, got together and they said, well, the problem is nobody wants to come to Oklahoma because everybody perceives Oklahoma to be the Dust Bowl, right? And there's still a lot of people that perceive Oklahoma to be the Dust Bowl, as we got this perception back in the 1930s, and we haven't shaken off the dust yet, right? We haven't gotten rid of it. So in the 60s, they got together and they said, okay, in Tulsa, we're definitely not brown and dusty like the rest of Oklahoma. We're green, all right? We're green, and we have pretty lakes, and we have nice hills, and we're different from the rest of flat, brown, dusty, sun-baked Oklahoma. So they came up with the term green country. Green country. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, I do.
They still use it?
Yeah.
Still use it. Green country. Well, the idea it caught on, and probably the reason it's still around after 50 years of use is because it's transmitted by the media a lot. And not only that, but guess what? Businesses start naming themselves. Businesses start incorporating the term green country into their business because they want to identify with that place. Green country. So that's just one that's very, very common. And vernacular regions are part of this longer-running trend for at least 20 years now to, shape what they call shape the brand of a place. There's actually a term referred to as place branding, where the Chamber of Commerce gets together and let's figure out what we've got going for us that will attract tourism, or maybe even attract businesses to bring in to establish offices and bring jobs. And there is a term for this that you'll run into a little bit later, and it's all about sort of recasting, sort of finding out who you are in a place and sort of rebranding the place. Anyway, any questions at this point?